She had already learned something painful about the world that week. Sometimes people see the truth, but they stay silent because silence feels safer. That evening, the city felt heavier than usual. The sky was slowly turning dark as streetlights flickered on one by one. The young woman walked along the sidewalk with slow steps, her shoulders tired after a long and stressful day. Her bag was held tightly against her chest, as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. Only a few weeks earlier, life at her workplace had seemed completely normal. She worked in a large corporate office where everything looked professional and organized. People smiled during meetings, spoke about teamwork, and constantly used words like honesty and integrity. She believed in those words. She worked harder than most employees, often staying late to finish reports and double-check documents. For her, the job was more than just a salary. It was something she wanted to build a future with, but one unexpected discovery had changed everything. While reviewing financial files one afternoon, she noticed something strange. A few numbers in the records didn't match the official reports. At first, she assumed it was a simple mistake, the kind that happens when people rush through paperwork. Still, something about it didn't feel right. Curiosity pushed her to look deeper into the files. The more documents she checked, the more unusual details appeared. Transactions had been shifted between accounts. Some records had been quietly edited after approval. Certain payments were hidden behind complex descriptions. Her heart began to race as the truth slowly became clear. This wasn't an accident. Someone inside the company was deliberately manipulating the accounts. For 2 nights, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the documents replayed in her mind. Reporting it could destroy her career. The people responsible might be powerful employees. But staying silent would mean accepting the corruption. Finally, she made the decision that felt right to her. She reported the irregularities to a senior manager she trusted. At first, he listened carefully and thanked her for bringing it forward. His reaction gave her hope that the company would investigate the problem honestly. But within days, everything began to change. The friendly office environment slowly turned cold. Conversations stopped when she walked into the break room. Colleagues who once joked with her suddenly became distant. One afternoon, she noticed 2 coworkers whispering while glancing in her direction. Another day, someone quietly moved to a different table when she sat down during lunch. The silence around her felt heavier each day. Soon she understood why. The people involved in the corruption were not small employees. They were influential figures within the company. Some had been there for years and held important positions. Instead of starting a proper investigation, management began treating the situation like an inconvenience. During a meeting with senior staff, one executive leaned back in his chair and calmly suggested she might have misunderstood the documents. His voice remained polite, but his message was clear. Accusing the wrong people could damage her reputation. Another manager advised her to think carefully before pushing the issue further. They reminded her that misunderstandings could create unnecessary trouble for everyone. She walked out of that meeting with a strange feeling in her chest. It wasn't fear, it was disappointment. Several employees clearly knew something was wrong, but none of them were willing to speak. They simply looked away and continued working as if nothing had happened. By the end of the week, she felt completely alone. That evening, she left the office later than usual. The busy daytime streets had already begun to quiet down. Most shops were closing, and the air carried the cool breeze of early night. She walked toward the bus stop while replaying the week's events in her mind. Maybe they were right, she thought for a moment. Maybe one person couldn't change anything. As she turned down a quieter side street, she noticed a small group of young men standing near a convenience store. Their laughter echoed across the nearly empty road. She lowered her gaze and continued walking, hoping to pass them quickly. At first, they simply watched her. Then one of them made a loud comment. Another followed with a mocking laugh. She ignored them and kept moving forward, trying not to react. Usually ignoring this kind of behavior was enough, but this time the footsteps behind her didn't stop. "Why are you walking so fast?" one of them called out. The laughter grew louder. Her grip tightened around her bag as she increased her pace. The street ahead seemed longer than usual. A few distant figures were visible near the main road, but none of them looked in her direction. The voices behind her continued. "What's the hurry? Hey, we're just talking." The sound of their footsteps closing the distance made her heart begin to pound. She glanced around, hoping someone nearby would notice what was happening, but the street remained quiet. It reminded her painfully of the office again. People seeing something wrong but choosing not to get involved. The group moved closer, their confidence growing with every second of silence from the surrounding street. One of them stepped directly in front of her path. She stopped walking. The buzzing streetlight above them cast long shadows across the pavement. The laughter around her felt louder now, filling the empty space of the road. For a moment she truly believed no one was going to help. Then suddenly a calm voice spoke from behind them. "That's enough." The voice was not loud, yet something about it made the laughter stop almost instantly. All of them turned. A man stood a few steps away holding the small hand of his daughter. He looked like any other tired parent returning home after a long day of work. His shirt sleeves were slightly rolled, his posture calm and his expression steady. But his eyes carried a quiet firmness. He stepped forward slowly, placing himself between the young woman and the group without showing anger or fear. The young men exchanged amused glances at first. "This doesn't concern you," one of them said casually. The father didn't react to the tone. He simply stood there, his presence calm but unmovable. His daughter stayed beside him quietly, holding his hand and watching everything. "I'm walking my daughter home," the man said gently. "And right now she's watching how adults behave." The words settled into the silence like a quiet weight. The confidence the group had shown a moment ago began to fade. What had seemed like entertainment now felt uncomfortable under someone else's calm attention. "You should leave," the father added, still without raising his voice. No shouting, no threats. Just certainty. One of the young men looked around the street, suddenly aware that a few distant pedestrians had slowed down to observe. The situation that once felt easy was no longer in their control. A few seconds later the group stepped back. One by one, they began to drift away, pretending the moment no longer mattered. Within moments, the street returned to silence. The young woman stood still, trying to process what had just happened. Only minutes earlier she had believed no one would step forward. Now the danger had disappeared as quietly as it began. "Are you all right?" the father asked kindly. She nodded, still catching her breath. "Yes, thank you." He gave a small, reassuring smile. "Most people stay quiet because they think someone else will help," he said. "But sometimes all it takes is one person to break that silence." His daughter looked up at him proudly, as if she already understood the lesson. They walked together toward the brighter main road. After a moment, the woman spoke softly about the trouble she had been facing at work, the corruption she reported, and the way everyone around her chose silence. The father listened carefully. "Doing the right thing often feels lonely at first," he told her, "but silence only protects the wrong people." His words stayed with her. Days later, she gathered every piece of evidence and reported the corruption through official channels outside the company. The investigation that followed slowly exposed the truth hidden inside the corporate office. People who once ignored the problem were finally forced to face it. And every time she doubted herself during that difficult process, she remembered the quiet stranger who had stepped forward on a dark street when everyone else stayed silent. Some heroes never appear in headlines. They simply do what is right when the moment demands it. And sometimes that simple act of courage is enough to change someone else's entire life.